let's take a step back before we get into what happened, and just sort of frame it in terms of what, where this case even started. So in 2019, Letitia James, New York State's elected first female attorney general, also a woman of color, she began an investigation into Donald Trump. And that investigation was civil, not criminal. And all the other cases that, I've come on to talk to you about have been criminal. So this is different. And she was proceeding with an investigation under the general business law, which involved fraudulent representations. Now, some readers, or some listeners rather, may be thinking, okay, isn't fraud criminal? And the answer is yes, it can be, but it also can be civil. And so this is under the Attorney General's powers to investigate. And specifically, she chose to investigate a certain group of LLCs, limited liability corporations, under the Trump Organization umbrella, as well as some named individuals, including Donald Trump himself, his two sons, Eric and Donald Jr., Alan Vesselberg, and I think there's one other name that I'm escaping me, but I think it's the another financial guy in the company. But basically, and then these 10 other LLCs. And again, it had to do with fraudulent misrepresentations under the general business law. And what it had to do with is that it sort of pointed to, these sort of very convenient overvaluations in cases where there are, bank loans or loans where these properties are serving as collateral. So, for example, Mar-a-Lago, was valued at, $1 billion when in fact, the assessed value, and we can talk about what the assessed value with the significance of that was, just $18 million. And then, of course, when it came time to pay taxes, you don't want those giant valuations, you want the lower valuations. And so, he made sort of, the opposite statement. So that's essentially the fraud that was alleged. And because of the way the New York State law, and there's the civil law, the general business law, and then there's a criminal component, which, the Attorney General could have proceeded under and chose, not to, for reasons that probably aren't relevant right now. I'm happy to explain why I think. But it would just be my opinion. The Martin Act, right? They both have to do with representations. But the thing that's really interesting in New York is that the standard is not whether you believe that it was true, but whether it's objectively false, right? And so that was the case. Now, what's unusual about this case is not that it was brought, because back, and one of my friends and colleagues, Mitchell Epner, who's also done a lot of podcasts, he reminded me of this really good point, which is Eliot Spitzer, our former governor with a bit of a past, but before he was a compromised governor, he was a sort of high-flying attorney general, and in the early aughts, when he was attorney general, he used the Martin Act to go after many financial services companies on Wall Street for the same idea of these false representations. But what was interesting about those cases, which is different than Trump, is that all of those companies who were basically saying, no, we didn't collude with our research side and our sales side, they realized that whether or not they did or they didn't, they realized the facts looked really bad and they needed to settle. So they made, so Spitzer, part of the reason he ended up becoming governor was because of these incredibly, onerous settlements that he was able to get out of these companies. Here in the Trump case, why we are here, and then we can delve into the decision, is that Trump said, no way. He said, I am not settling, go give me your best shot. And here we are, in one, probably, I can't think of any in my lifetime. And I think that they're, so rare for a judge to order the dissolution of companies, but that is literally the corporate death penalty, which basically, emanates from Trump saying, I'm not settling, and we're going to go forward. So that's essentially the history of the case, and that's what happened, but we can talk more about the details, obviously, because that's sort of a very broad statement.